If you find this podcast beneficial, you can elevate it and yourself by going to the Products Store section of nilesheckman.com, which has numerous channels of support, such as becoming a patron to access certain extended or extra content, downloading the show archive, watching our related documentary ventures, and more. I'm glad we had this talk. This is An Infinite Path, a podcast focused on growth and creativity, which can be found at aninfinitepath.com. I'm your host, Niles Heckman. Greetings upon you, fellow sentient beings of Stardust. What follows is a conversation which was recorded in March of 2019 between Rack Rollerskate Razam and myself. Yes, Rack's middle name is literally Rollerskate because he had hippie parents. The word rollerskate literally is on his passport and all legal documents. Another little known fact about Rack is his signature contains a lightning bolt. Gotta love him. He is a world's leading experiential journalist, writing about and helping shape the emergence of the new cultural paradigm in the 21st century. A writer, film producer, and culture maker, he bridges the worlds of shamanism, consciousness, and popular culture. He has been a frequent guest on this podcasting venture, and as someone I love dearly, is also a colleague developing an episodic documentary series called Shamans of the Global Village, which he is the host, writer, and producer of, with yours truly as the director, cinematographer, and editor. Which, yes, makes me sound like I'm still in film school, but give me a break, because we are guerrilla indie filmmakers working on not even shoestring budgets, but shoeless budgets. So we must wear many hats. Rack is a very eloquent and creative person. He's also a testament to how the many consciousness-expanding drugs he's taken in his life has expanded him instead of contracted him, and has made his life better and contain less suffering. He conceptualized Shamans of the Global Village, which past listeners to this venture are probably quite familiar with due to the many themes of which interweave and intertwine with subjects, concepts, and some of the guests who appear within this podsphere. The very brief recap of the show is that it's an investigative adventure documentary series which examines not only shamanic medicines, but the shamans that wield them. Shamans of the Global Village is unique with a focus on both indigenous and modern men and women learning to become shamans. What drives them, what their backgrounds are, and why the role of the shaman is vital in the 21st century. If, as the extremely unperfect human being Marshall McLuhan once said, we are now in a global village, then we need our own healers that understand the deep power and sacredness these ancient earth medicines can reveal. For if the words life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness don't include the right to expand your own consciousness, then the Declaration of Independence isn't worth the hemp it was written on. We shot the pilot episode in 2015, and it was released in 2016, basically 100% independently, with a little help from our friends. Suffice to say, it's not for the faint of heart, and has ended up being quite controversial. For numerous reasons, but mainly because of the practices of the shaman who is the focus of the first episode, who has been featured in the back archive of this podcast if you care to follow that down the rabbit hole. As someone who has a background working in Hollywood, essentially making pretty pictures, this show has ended up being the culmination of not only my skill set, but also Rack's as well. With our dual filmmaking and narrative skills combined with Rack's interview skills and my technical skills, alchemically stewed into us also becoming somewhat journalists and hopefully non-imperialistic anthropologists. Throughout our many learning experiences on episode 1, which can be seen at shamansoftheglobalvillage.com by the way, we have learned to disclaim that us as the creators do not necessarily endorse any of the practitioners featured on our shows, nor are we blanketly promoting entheogenic usage. For this is very serious stuff, and you are responsible for your own path, for your own health and mental state. So please do your research on earth medicines to see if they are right for you, and also regarding any practitioner serving them. Whilst we do research and vet people we film, reputations and practices change over time, and community feedback is the best indicator of a shamanic practitioner's integrity. Thus, we are not promoters or spokespeople, we are documentarians who are fascinated by the expansion of consciousness and our aim is to highlight that shamanism is a key component to a healthy community or civilization. For just as a journalist who interviews a warlord is not responsible for everything that warlord later does in their life, we go out and document and then share. And I personally always try to share in the most cinematic and, let's say, visually stunning way. So do check out episode 1 if you haven't already. It's one of the best pieces of shamanic media that will ever be made, of course. We are biased because we are the creators, but in our sharing, all we can personally testify to is our own direct experiences, which are to date extremely positive, but have also gleaned personal gnosis along the way with having created a piece of outstanding filmmaking each time. So after many struggles to actualize a second episode of this slow drip made series, it is about to exist. But I will say that completing a film, and each one of these episodes is basically like making an entire documentary feature film, is one of the most challenging things you can possibly do. There are folks who run other metaphysical podcasts I have heard who went to film school and couldn't become viable filmmakers, one of the reasons being because a film degree is basically as useful as a philosophy degree. It can be easier to lecture on extremely complex spiritual philosophic subjects such as tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, and ceremonial magic than it can be to complete a film independently and make it good. That being said, this podcast has manifested to share that episode 2 of the show Shamans of the Global Village, Jose Luis Ramirez and the Peyote Cactus, was shot in March of 2019, and the following upcoming conversation with Rack took place during that time. We got a very sudden invite to follow an indigenous group on their annual pilgrimage, coincidentally again in Mexico, just like episode 1. It's currently being edited at the time of this recording by me, which takes front stage priority and means everything else gets put to the back burner a bit, such as the documentary narrations and the essays for this podcast. But there will be many more of those continuing to slow trickle into the future. That being said, I'll take this rare prologue to an episode to remind you that your patronage is always welcome for this podcast and these other ventures, which I would love to do through nilesheckman.com, but Squarespace doesn't allow for that, so I'm currently using less than perfect Patreon, patreon.com/nilesheckman. The trip to shoot episode 2 was an adventure into spirit, answering the call and invitation to partake in the sacred peyote pilgrimage and ceremonies with the indigenous Huichols, one of the native tribes of Mexico and some of their medicine people, the Marakames. With next to no budget but support of a shamanic crew in the Huichol community, we plunged into 3 arduous, sleepless days and nights on the road to Warakuta, the holy land of peyote. All of it was ceremony, the blessings on the land, and the water spots where they say life first flourished, the air, the fire, the earth sacrifices on the altar of spirit, the smiles of the children, and the mothers as we pilgrimage from spot to spot, offering up our blessings to the land and Pachamama, shamanizing the earth in the old ways. The Peyote Hunt was a sacred experience, as was the ceremony at night with the men, women, and children of the tribe, singing and dancing and letting spirit enter us, through us, and back into the sacred contract with the world. And the world sang back, a song so old and so full that everyone was part of it, each of us a note in the vibrational symphony of life, and we remembered. And so, we share with you this remembering in our media, which is also our medicine, the medicine for a global village. And this conversation is part of that. Part download notes, part trip report, part call to action, and also further explanation on why we choose to take on this extremely challenging venture. It's a little puffery, meaning containing overly flowery and complex language, which you sometimes find in psychedelic communities of people who try and talk like Terence McKenna. But it's better to expand our language than contract it like they do on low-resonant talking bobblehead puppet corporate news networks. I must confess we were also still a bit high on mescaline, so that's part of why we are the way we are in what follows. Love and light. Rolling. All right, so this is Rack and Niles talking about episode 2 SGV, Peyote Experiences.
It was fucking hard work.
Yeah, so this is just a little bit of a log for the show. We've had 3 to 4 days of brutality in Mexico, camping, constantly on the road, on these hellish, awful back roads, in dusty campsites, in the wintertime, very hot still, very uncomfortable.
Very cold at night.
Very cold at night, minimal food.
Do we mention no sleep?
Minimal sleep.
Do we mention how that deranges a person's sensibilities and how you have to perform on camera and be cogent and you're actually melting down inside?
Minimal coffee.
No coffee until just now, the last day.
We've just had
coffee headaches.
So now we can do these testimonials like with some coffee, having had coffee. So should you want to go first, dude, or should I?
So what am I saying? What do you want?
You're going to talk about your experience on Peyote.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this is probably not necessarily for episode 1. Maybe, well, it may be for you. For me, not necessarily, but we'll...
So, it was very beautiful and very gentle. Like, it's bitter to eat, but it's not as bad as San Pedro to get down. Very earthy. And they say that peyote is like the grandfather energy, the masculine. But for me, it was actually very gentle. Not in the sense that it wasn't potent, but in the fuerteness and the force of it, it woos you. It's like waves lapping an ocean. It woos you into letting go of the mind, of the ego, and to be present with what comes up, whether that's your unconscious or connecting to a visionary state or to what the transmission it wants to bring through. And you know what? I really think it was a similar message I've had from ayahuasca and from bufo toad and from all these sacred medicines, because they're all avatars of the earth. They're all extensions of the earth, right? There's this theory that they're exopheromones, that they're actually secreted by the earth, and that the chemical constituents of the psychoactive plants are designed to plug into humans and to be bridges to bring us back to nature, so we don't forget, so we remember. And the thing that I remembered with Grandfather Peyote, the sacred hickory of the Huicholes, was so simple, and it's the same message every time on multiple entheogens. It's like, frankly, it's like love is all there is, but it's deeper than what the Western conceit of what love is. Love is intelligent, love is radiant, love is the unifying force of the universe. It's like the God force, the creator, the source. It's like a song. It's always being sung, it's emanating, it's radiating, and yet we're deaf to it. Not the species of humans, but modern humans have fallen out of step. We've lost the song. And the song is the song of Source, creating the universe. And that's why we've made mistakes. That's why we feel so alone. That's why we don't understand who and what we really are and what we're embedded in. And this is the process of remembering. This is the journey home to Mother Nature, which we are embedded in, like one strand of a planetary biome. We are the microorganisms in Gaia, and we've gone off. We're craving sugar. We're taking from the earth. We're separate. And all we have to do is let go of that mind, that egoic mind enough, which coincidentally is exactly what these sacred medicines do. They reduce the default mode network, the sense of ego and identity, and it reduces that separation. So we open up again to what's within us all along, to the sacred, to Mother Earth, to source consciousness, to the song being sung. And it is so freaking beautiful. I mean, it's just like the smile of a baby to its mother. You know, it's like this, so human, so incarnate, so sacred that we forget. It's so simple. The sacred is all around, and it's so simple. It's what gives us life. And this is the journey to remember. This is what Grandfather Peyote taught me, that we have the song within us, and it wants us to sing. It wants our life to be the note. And collectively we make up this planetary Icaro, this song back of joy to the world and to the Creator. Gracias, gracias Peyote, gracias Huicholes, gracias planet Earth, gracias, gracias, gracias.
So obviously those are some thoughts from past experiences and this experience added to. In terms of like the specific details of what happened for you, was it very heart-based and feeling-based, not so much visual-based, not so much audible-based? What happened with your senses, and then what happened with your heart and your visuals?
It was very, very warming. It was very much like just being present, like you know, we all have this center within us, and it's finding that center point where the mind's not constantly flickering and thinking and riffing off. And in that center point, There was a warmth and a joy and a love and a connection, a reconnection. So there was some visuals coming in and out as I was slipping into sort of a lucid dreaming sort of phase, and there was some visuals to it. It wasn't the full Huichol sort of beadwork visuals, but it was more this. On the inside, it mirrored the outside, which was the ceremony with the Marakames and the tribe, and this feeling of understanding that the men, the women, and the children, like all of us, were partaking of peyote, and all of us were like forming this human circuit for the song to come out. And when the Marakames played their music, it was like the connection of peyote was the bridge to this song of creation, which was singing through all of us on the outside, and this feeling of oneness and togetherness and beingness and perfection in the moment.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's such resonances with doing this together with others that are wanting to have the experience and knowing how the experience works and adding to the experience through like a musical circuit, as you say. And it definitely resonates through the experience of getting downloads or having gears move forward and feeling like you've progressed from a new experience with a new entheogenic medicine, of realizing that what you kind of thought was the case is only amplified and realized more, which is very much a heart dynamic. And if we could think of the universe as a mental construct in the mind of the all, it's like the peyote helps show us that nature, we dream this dream into reality as an aspect of a larger divine mind, and the peyote helps show us that our thoughts are very much causative, and our thoughts are very much help bring things into manifestation, and things that we suspected were the case are in fact the case. That's what peyote had definitely was a teaching on this end.
And you know what? It's like, many of these indigenous cultures, they say that this world is the dream, and that the originating world is where the dreamers are dreaming from. And it's like when we have these thoughts that become actions and become manifest in the world, it makes me feel with these medicines that we're just receiving. We're receiving like the downloads and the codes, and it's like we're conduits, and humans are the bridge between heaven and earth. And what we're doing down here is manifesting the simulation, but it's being dreamed by a higher source, and it's manifesting and anchoring on the earth.
Yes, and that higher source or those higher vibrational densities are spirit-based or mentally based, and the peyote helps connect us with those spirits, however they are received to you through whatever the five senses are, whether it's a heightening of your visual acuity or your audible senses, or your ability to just get profound thoughts and realizations of what the spirits are either saying to you or feeling to you or showing to you visually. So the experience I had was extremely visual.
Yeah.
And I think that I haven't heard of anybody else so far on this trip having had such a visual experience.
What did you see?
Well, you're right about the subtlety of it. It is a subtle medicine. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a very knock you out very instantaneously, but it's instantaneous, but it's very similar to cannabis, in which you eat and there's a latent period of nothing really happening for about an hour, right? So we each ate 2 pieces of peyote that were prepared for us on the altar. And I think about 45 minutes later, you and I testified to around the campfire saying that we felt a little bit of a stomach, I don't want to say sickness, but a little bit of a one-fifth of the way to feeling like you're going to puke, but you're not going to actually puke. Activating
energy and a sensitization.
Exactly, and that sensitization is heightened by just a fuzziness of your physicality, of your body. And I wasn't sure if from our previous conversations, we were going to have toad recall activation effects in terms of aspects of that, but that did not happen at all physically for me. So as we're standing around, I wasn't getting so much visuals then. It was very much just feeling into it. So there's the heart for you. And then at some point, I was looking up at one of the lights that we had while we were filming, and I started to see like kind of prismatic drops in the pond shimmering off from the light, that kind of chromatic aberration that I often talk about, like ripples of rainbows emanating out from that light. So I started getting the sense that if I was to go lay down in the tent, I would get somewhere further with this. Because I think through these experiences, especially one that's going to last as long as this one is, it's not uncommon for it to last 5 or 6 hours, if not longer, depending upon how much you take. that I knew I would get further if I went and lied down. So between that time and the realization of that, I took probably 3 more pieces. So I think I ate 5 pieces of peyote. And you were saying that the smaller pieces are more powerful or have more...
Yeah, they're more potent, apparently, the little buds, the buttons.
Yeah, and you need to be careful that you're not eating the flowers on top, which can apparently really
make you nauseous. Yeah.
Really nauseous. So every time I grabbed for new pieces which were set on the altar, I was always grabbing for smaller pieces, or pieces from a smaller plant, I should say, as there's a stack of pieces on the altar. So I took 2 more and then went and lied down in the tent. And upon closing my eyes, upon closing the eyelids, it all started for me. That was where it like really began. So visually, it started to really feel like a landscape of something that had, I don't want to say a Mexican feel, but a very flavor of the desert. And it was almost like you're looking at a tiny world of landscapes of an undersea coral reef, right? Where everything's flowing and ebbing. And I agree with your water analogy of it's very much the movement of everything, and it feels very water-like. So it's a constant changing and flowing in a very fluid way in an undersea reef that has a combination of feeling like it's halfway between some sort of alien, hyper saturated, hyper neon, hyper glowing underwater coral reef combined with a native desert landscape like you might find in Mexico or in Texas or places where the peyote lives. So it's like it had this flavoring of the desert where this undersea world, which was not really undersea but had that dynamic of rolling hills that were ebbing and flowing, and then all sorts of protruding plants coming off of them. And I had sent you once recently this picture of a hand that had on each finger was another hand that fractaled out. So each emanation from this flowing landscape is a fractaling out creature. It wasn't so much chromatic. It wasn't so much fractal holographic in the sense of it's just patterns. It was actual shapes of a landscape that was an alien desert landscape that looked kind of coral reef-like. And it had very much a flavoring of something that you might see in like a stop-motion animation claymation movie, like the textures, combined with something that looked almost like icing on the cake or Cupcakeville. So it had this kind of sweet, tarty, fun, flavory dynamic of all these entities that were ebbing and flowing and looking very otherworldly. And these are the spirits. These are the spirits of the experience. So as those things are transitioning from ebb and flow and state to state, I started getting specific contacts with very interesting, what you could call spirits or entities that were transitioning as these landscapes were constantly changing and evolving and moving. And ones I can remember was there was a time when Peyote told me to walk through the door, walk through some period of moving into a new space and engaging my will to make myself do that, which is probably a multi-dimensional way of saying in real life you should walk through more doors that open for you, as I have been in my life personally, right? So Peyote is saying you must walk through the door. You must have forward progress in things that you're doing in your life on top of what these spirits are showing you. So as I walk through the door, I see this creature that looks like it's some Alex Gray quadruple-headed thing that almost peacocks out. So it's like this peacock heading out with thousands of eyes.
Wow.
And it's white and has this it looks very much like the cactuses of the desert that were around. But it's like this half stacked cactus that's ebbing and flowing like an underwater reef, remembering? And it has all these tentacle arms. Very, very octopi meets desert look. So it's like an octopus with tentacles that isn't suction cups and slimy and sticky. It's this kind of icing on the cake look, like cake frosting entity that has very spiky thorns like you would find in the cactuses of the desert. I almost think of like in a Mexico sense, it almost has this flavor and playfulness of like a a Day of the Dead parade too, where you have all this individual stuff ebbing and flowing.
You know what I think it is? It's like changing channels, and when we tune in on the different plant medicines, there's different flavors or different frequencies. And so the reason why there's all this commonality between the iconography of sort of the Aztec-y and the Mesoamerican shapes and sort of, zigzags and things like that. It's like they're readouts of the bioenergetic, planetary grid. I mean, so when peyote comes from the earth and from the ground, it's connected in the web of life. It's imprinting all the energies of, when we say the spirits, everything has spirit in it. So all the plants, the trees, everything has its own unique flavor and signature, which could be represented visually. And so then when we take these medicines and they open up the whole spectrum, we see these entities because the peyote's connected to them. They're all in a family relationship in the unitary field of the earth. And, that's how we connect. And that's why those visions, I think, are so common across all these Mesoamerican cultures.
And as we're recording this, we're sitting in a van surrounded by just, I want to say, lush desert, rolling,
dry,
dusty, but not empty void of just salt flat. It's very much has a lot of vegetation. And this experience feels like you've channel reality has switched the current environment that we're in to a higher vibrational version of itself that's intelligent. And all these plants, you're seeing their avatar in an alien form that's giving you information, that's giving you data transfer, that's telling you things. And it's constantly shifting and changing. It's like no two moments are the same. It's usually like you're always transitioning from one thing to another. So as a specific spirit comes in, and that spirit may look like a totem tower that's constantly shifting and changing with, a solid red face and 16 eyes and tentacle arms, and the Alex Gray style three faces, which is the Eastern, Hindu god.
Multidimensionality,
Yeah, and that is looking at you and sensing things to you. It's allowing you to see itself so that when you have kind of dreamed these types of wild things that, or just thought of them in your imagination, that that they're kind of calling to you to then find them in a more concretized way. And the peyote gives you an amplification to really see them in a better way. It's like I could dream up some crazy creature that was seen on peyote that sounds like something you'd see in the deepest depths of an alien planet's coral reef. But when peyote lets you get there.
This is like the building. I call it like God's Lego, right? And it's like, so DNA, when it imprints with the code of life, and then it not just replicates, but it sort of bifurcates, and it fractals out into different shapes which fit the environment and riff off each other. But there's an intelligence to it. And so when we say like alien, the most we can imagine, the most alien thing is just a non-human thing, right? It's a non-unitary form thing of, so these undersea octopuses, insectoid, this is the web of life and the diversity of the code as it grows forms for itself. And they're not necessarily alien. It's all one. It's the one being in many, many forms as it expresses. If you could zoom up and out, pan out type thing, you'd see that Gaia is a single organism, and all of the species are like strands in the planetary biome. It's like 7 trillion microorganisms in our stomach bacteria, as above, so below in Gaia itself, humans and animals and plants, all of them in a cooperative sort of structure of transferring energy, and they're all one big thing. They're all working to propagate life itself in that transference of energy.
They are, and it's interesting that to reference on the alien dynamic of something that isn't just necessarily a corporeal being that has 2 arms and 2 legs and looks like us and has gray eyes, but it's all of these otherworldly spirits, which, you could switch out alien for spirit. Spirit's a better way of looking at it, is almost like if you just took a plant and you were on it's almost like when you're at Disneyland on It's a Small World After All ride, and your peyote is taking you on this ride through It's a Small World After All, which has all these individual little creatures and characters in a sea of many, a huge amount of diversity of like little elf, like alien, like spiritoid, half plant, half other dimensional, ebbing and flowing things that are each saying hello to you, and heart-wise at no point ever feeling like you're not in belonging and that you haven't not been here before. So it did feel like you have had contact with these entities before, these spirits before, and you're remembering that recontact. You're knowing thyself by remembering your mental aspects of the absolute otherworldly misses when you go into other spaces. But you're right, it is all part of this. And it's not some other planetary thing. It's all here at the same time, at the same place, here. But it's so amazing to have an entity like Peyote allow you to access those things or help you access those things in such an efficient and calm and relaxing manner, because it was a very, it's very just tame and nice and enjoyable. It's
that's
like
part of the Marakames style of holding that space in ceremony. It was sort of exuberant and joyful and reverent and sacred, but sort of gentle as well. It wasn't really forceful or big drums or anything like that. It was flowing and it was organic and it was, that's what I really got from it. It was like opening up and reconnecting to that song that's always being sung and just wants to express through us.
Yeah, and the DMT experiences for me personally have felt very kaleidoscopic and prismatic, right? Where you're seeing kind of standard kaleidoscope changes. But this always felt like I was on some sort of terrain, like I was floating above a world, and there was this terrain with all these characters that were constantly connected to the terrain. So it was like you're in an aircraft flying above a landscape, and all these entities, these spirits, are connected to that landscape. It's not, but the landscape and those spirits are always changing. So in that sense, Peyote has the flavor of the desert. It has this desert meets coral reef landscape to it visually for what I experienced. And that peacock reference of like when a peacock opens its feathers, it's like that's the transition period to like a specific time when you go to one point in that landscape, or you're flying or floating to one point in the landscape, and you focus in on one of the spirits and it sees you and acknowledges you, and then kind of peacocks open.
Yeah.
And then something transitions from that peacocking. If it's suddenly you're seeing very high, perfect high resolution, highest frame rate, highest detail, hundreds and hundreds of eyes peacocking up at you from this alien plant spirit creature. And then that is helping transition you to something else that's going to give you new data and new information. So it's a very nice, that's why I use it's a small world after all. It's a very calm ride, but a very, what yummy winter wonderland, liquid sweet tart. Sweet. It was very sweet. It was very calm. It was very inviting, and at no point did I feel any fear.
I think that's the flavor of sacredness is the sweetness. So this is the interesting takeaway for me, is that to use modern sort of computer terminology, there's a constant data transfer between Gaia and all her organisms that is alive, reciprocal, eating and feeding on itself and growing new life forms and transferring this information, which is the song, right? And that it's almost incredible that we've forgotten that we've like just boxed ourselves off in little cubicles and, this culture which is actually embedded in nature. We're a species cargo cult, and we've forgotten it.
Yeah.
We've blinkered ourselves off, and we just pick and choose the little bits of nature which feel safe. But, it's like, how could we have done this? How could we have forgotten the primacy and the immediacy and the joy and the sacredness? And it's like, I'm amazed that for all this psychedelic renaissance and global shamanic revival, and this still a sort of idea in the West that we're having a peak experience and we're opening up to this thing, but it's not just about a peak experience. It's always there. It's always there if we learn how to reconnect, and like the Huicholis, to have the right relationship and have the old traditions have kept the connecting hubs, connecting the nodes, so this energy can continue to communicate to the indigenous people. And as the modern world re-sacralizes, it needs its own relationships to, feed the spirits, to do that energy transfer, the give and take. And it's the scale of it is enormous, and it's not distant, it's not oblique, it's not separate. The process itself of that data transfer and that communication is the sacred thing. It's like the life force itself, like the current is God.
Yeah, it all emanates from one place, that's for sure. And that's as these medicines have different flavors and feels, it's definitely interesting to have experienced multiple psychedelic medicines in their indigenous proper environments, where you see the different flavors of them and you see the different teachings that they have and how they have similar overarching themes of what they tell you, but then different kind of small brushstroke sub-flavors, right? Like the cosmicness of the psilocybin mushroom, or the insanely undescribable fractal holography of the DMT space, or the white light void of unity consciousness of the 5-MeO space, or the
it's a map.
The Gaian mother of ayahuasca. And this felt, our comrade in arms on this, Carlos, was saying that peyote has a very masculine feel that's a compromising, a kind of a similar balance to ayahuasca of Gaian mother and nature. But as ayahuasca is very much a mother, peyote is very much of a almost masculine figure. And that was certainly true. Every entity or every spirit that I saw had very much of a masculine flavor to it, where it was a strong warrior spirit, and it was all kind and loving and androgynous, not specific sex, but it definitely didn't feel like it was the womb of Earth. It felt like it was some other version of Earth in some more, again, undescribable space of these rolling underwater reefs meets liquid sweet tarts meets peacocking eyes meets desert landscape amped up to plus 1,000 degrees of diversity. The diversity and the unbelievable just differences in it is what I always take away from these things, of just how much you see or how much you experience in what is a very calming and not intensive experience. It's not like the analyticalness of LSD, for example. It's very organic, and it does feel very much like nature is giving you the information. It's not like a circuit board. It's not digital, it's organic. It's very organic. And that organicness, however it gets communicated to you, whether me being such a visual person seems to see a lot and other folks seem to feel a lot, it's just beautiful, the diversity of people's experiences as well, in terms of like everybody being their own unique snowflake and having their own unique experience. And that's the thing, is like we could do this dozens of more times and have a dozen different experiences, and that's the McKenna mindset of the psychedelic experience is always so different.
Well, it's real time. It's real time information transfer. You're different. The planet's different. It's evolving. It's growing. It's communicating.
And
it's a constant. It's a constant message. I mean,
it is. And right when you think you know what you're going to get, you get something novel and different and what you need. It's like you get progress. You make progress.
The old Alan Watts quote is like, when you get the message, hang up the phone. It's like, I think it's completely the other way around. It's like, it's like when you get the message, be the message. It's like Marshall McLuhan. It's like the planetary mainframe is evolvingly communicating the message of the universe to you. You are the message. You are the manifestation of the source code as it becomes the transmission. And it's like, don't hang up the phone. Be the message.
Right. And it's beautiful to be with people here who have had experiences with other medicines, and this may or may not have been their first experience, but they understand that everything does happen for a reason, where we are now as we're recording this. And we have certainly sure as shit found that on this show, man, that we are guided in some ways, not to sound like it's all for us, but
oh my God, you couldn't believe the car broke down twice, and then we get a random call as we're sitting in the broken down car from another documentary filmmaker I know who has a drone camera, which we were trying to manifest, and a car. I mean, just the most perfect holographic, synchronous support from the universe to do this.
Those are like the ripples in the pond from these other places that then apply here. And it's like, you are being supported through doing the work to get to these places. And you could talk about the pilgrimage too, where when you pilgrimage, which this episode has been, it's a pilgrimage through a difficult few days, very difficult few days.
It's part of the sacrifice. It forces you to be present.
And it forces
in
you
all
to be
the
present,
adversity.
and it allows you to then get amazing reward when you put in that sacrifice to get these types of things. And our comrade Javier was saying that everything happens for a reason. He understands that, you understand that, I understand that. So we do find when we're working on these episodes that it's amazing having just 2 in the can now, how it is something that we enjoy doing. It's got
we never set out to do this. We were invited by the Huicholis and some of our crew.
Exactly. And it allows it to come into manifestation when the time feels right.
Yeah, because it's not the ego driving it. It's being in service to the message. When the message formulates all that data enough that it wants to then output, that's when it all comes together, and it draws the constituent parts of all its its agents in the field together to be the conduit for that message to come through. You know, my first experience with ayahuasca in Peru in 2006, the last ceremony and the last vision and how the Aya Awakenings book ends, it just happened. It was like this beautiful, fully realized holographic vision of this withered ancient crone of this Madre Ayahuasca, this Shipibo woman, and she was like really withered, like bone and skin, you could see everything, and you know, hair in the wind, and basically she was emanating to me, and she was saying like, you know, don't be afraid, little soul. It's like, this is what it's all about. This, for what you were saying, the adversity, the realness of getting out of the boxes and out of the Western culture and being back on the earth with the wind and the dust and the sun and what we say is the adversity. But what it does is that it anchors you. It anchors you in the realness of the moment of what life really is. You're meant to feel this. Yeah. You know, you're meant to feel life. You're not meant to shut off from it. That's how the message transmits through you, by being open and by interacting with the land which you are part of and allowing that message to come through, that feeling to come through. That's the thing, you know, go towards the light, little soul, go towards the light.
You're meant to have this experience at that point in that time. And it's beautiful to do these things very, I don't want to just say slow drip, but when we have a large separation between not trying to force the experience, but allowing the experience to come to us. Yeah. Is similar to also having the medicine experiences, where I find huge benefit in having these experiences not very often, rarely, very sporadic.
And in the right container, of a sacred ceremony.
And that's all you need. It's like, I feel like I could, you know, have this one experience and just cherish this one. It's not like I need to sit down and do it 20 more times over the next few months. And it's all about quality over quantity, which is kind of.
And there's a path. So different people, different seekers on the pilgrimage, they might get the instruction to work more with ayahuasca or work more with peyote, and it's because it's got specific lessons for them. But the plant spirits are like allies, they say, and so sometimes, like, I love Madre Ayahuasca, but my ally and my calling is the bufo, right? It's like, you know, when it's a perfect fit. It's like it's like this non-monogamous relationship in the plant. You go around and you see what feels best
personality type,
until you fall in love with the one, you know, plant ally, which is the one you'll most resonate with and is meant to be the one you're meant to work with. So some people, you know, I find this is part of that global shamanic resurgence. It's like the crew we were with, they're Mexican, but they're city Mexicans, but yet they're relearning the Huichol ways and working with peyote, and they're working with ayahuasca. And it's not just any one egoic centralization in this shaman figure. You know, the shaman thing is overrated. The shaman or the medicine person is in service to the tribe and the community. It's a fucking hard role. It's austerity, it's sacrifice, and it's constantly purifying yourself to be in constant service to the community, to regulate it, like signal processing, to keep the circuit of energy going in little ways. We saw with Don Jose, it's not just in the medicine of taking the peyote, it's the songs, it's the ritual, it's the instruction to the tribe, it's keeping them moving, keeping them sacralized, keeping them in the traditions. And as I see this modern generation coming on board and learning from these indigenous elders, it's like, it's something that we all have. And, you know, it's not to get politically correct here, but we're all indigenous to planet Earth. And people say, well, the West just needs to figure out its own way. Well, how the fuck do we do that unless we have instruction from the elders who have retained the old ways? And, you know, we may need to retrofit or customize them for the global ghettos in the cities, but it's like the old ways are the perennial ways. And we're all indigenous, and we all have this. It's not just a shamanic capacity, it's this capacity to open to the song and open to the instruction of spirits. Like, essentially, we're all fucking shamans in the sense of mediating heaven and earth, mediating the message. And I really feel that, you know, in a village structure in prehistory, it's centralized in the role of one person, but there's been cultures which they're all open to this. It's the human potential to be intelligently aware of the expression of Pachamama as it connects and sings through you. And, you know, I think that we've had this, we're seeing this resurgence, and we're seeing this reuptake in these lineages being kick-started and created. But essentially, well, I see the culmination point of like humanity re-sacralizing and being able to be their own conduit to the divine message.
So true that we all have shamanic aspects within us, and we are all shamans, because this experience on this show has showed that we do have focuses on elders that help teach, but pretty much everybody here through the night that we just had, the ceremony that just lasted all through the night, was contributing in a shamanic capacity. You know, whether it's you're being part of the ikaro and the dancing, or you're actually doing the singing, or you're doing the preparing. It's one unit. It's one unit.
There's no spectators when it comes to Pachamama medicine, right? We're all participants. The responsibility is the ability to respond to the message that you're feeling that's awakened within you, and that's what's spreading. That's what's coming, and that's what's needed.
What's needed
to
the
re-sacralize
tribe, the community, and these types of ceremonies. What other way in life can you connect up with people in a very short period of time and get so close to them through such an amazing, heart-opening, expansive experience that shows you a higher level aspect of what you really are and what you have full capabilities of experiencing. So in the modern industrialized, air quotes, first world, we don't have that. We have such separation. So this communion of getting together to share an experience and all add to the experience really builds community and lets you get to know people pretty well in a pretty short period of time.
Man, we were there with those kids with those snotty noses and dirt-covered faces, and when they look at you, and it's like, well, they're our kids too. It's like the tribal thing. There's a beautiful acceptance. Not that we're Americans or Westerners. It's just that we're all humans on Spaceship Earth. We're all part of the global tribe. We're all one people.
Yeah.
We're Pachamama's people, and that they're helping us to remember. And then it's like, so the tribe grows, and it needs that solidarity because there's a global emergency from essentially the Western sickness that's gone over the earth and the way we're relating to the earth. And so as we come in and we rejoin their tribe, the tribe grows, and that one tribe starts to blow. It's almost like a homeopathic immune response syndrome from the planet. It's like more and more humans need to come back to the garden, come back to the song, come back to the sacredness, because once you feel it, you've got it. And then whichever way you choose to integrate that or to continue on the path or not, even if just the memory of that space within you, it's like essentially what I believe is we are the medicine, like the peyote and the ayahuasca and the bufo and the San Pedro. Humans are sacred medicine, and we just need to remember where that on switch is to reconnect like the other creatures of Gaia do.
Right, and one of the calls that we had when we were talking with our team to come down here was that the old ways cannot continue, like you said. This kind of laissez-faire, hyper gangster, corporate crony, mega capitalism.
Sickness.
All isms
It's
is just a sickness because it's so unsustainable and so destructive. And we can also see that some things that the modern world do are good. And you can see some of the negative aspects of how the tribe lives. So there are balance points, but we know that you must live much more in harmony with
I think
nature.
this is the iteration. Nature. Like we forget and we remember. We forget and as we forget and we go off into the ego precision point of we fall out of network-centric consciousness into hierarchical point consciousness, and in doing that, we create new things, and we can create iterations of things which can be valuable. And then as we come back into network Gaian consciousness, we can bring those things to elevate up. So this idea of this, there's world ages and there's cycles and seasons of consciousness, and we forget and remember. But within that, there's golden ages, and it falls to silver and bronze and iron and Kali Yuga type stuff. But as we come back into that peak state, it's like the galactic signal processing is fully lined up, so the energy is completely transmitting around and feeding around, and the knowledge is there, the awareness is there, the resources are there, and the way is there to create basically heaven on earth. And I think that's a season of consciousness which is coming back full circle, and that's what we're meant to do. So this fall into egoic consciousness is just a stage we're going through. What can we learn with, look at the technologies we've got, like information technology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, AI technology. If we can sacralize those modern technologies, they're the planet too, they're spirit too. It's like how, and they're birthing through us. So this phase in history, in his story, has been necessary to build and create portals for these new things coming through, which are of themselves just as sacred as the peyote or the ayahuasca or the trees or the clouds. They're all creation, you know?
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that Cosmic Coincidence Control Center leads us to see these things and helps show us these things and can show everybody these things. And we can see that these people, these Marakame and Huichol people, have struggles and their lives are difficult, but they have an amazing connection to spirit and to Pachamama and to the understanding of these things that we've hinted on. And they do live not in perfect balance with nature, but more sustainable within nature and have more longevity within that dynamic of how they choose to spend their time. And just the community about them, of spending time together with loved one and brethren around the fire, rather than just compartmentalization and separatization. I agree that trying to be in service to others versus in service to just yourself, you always have to find a way to be in service to yourself through being in service to others. And these medicines can really help show us that.
That's part of the Western disconnect, is we want to be valuable. We want to plug in. We want community. We want love. You know, we want our time on planet Earth to be meaningful. And we're hungry for that meaning. And once you have that planetary reconnection, and then you see how that expresses in the tribe and the community, they were so freaking beautiful. I didn't see anyone bitching. I didn't see anyone like begrudging. It was like they all had a role. They all were in service to continuing the flow of the energy of the ceremony and the pilgrimage. And they were all valuable. And so even though they're, you know, poor and they're like, you know, tired and worn down, they were together and they had this family, you know, this love between them that is something that we often lack in the West.
There's such a soft spot too now for Mexico over the negative stereotypes you ever hear of Mexico. Mexico is such a beautiful country in a lot of ways, and the struggles of it, and I'm so wanting to continue to hold Mexico in a beautiful light, and through making episodes that we just coincidentally happen to have the first two episodes of Shamans of the Global Village take place in Mexico. But I will always now have like special place in my heart for Mexico.
Yeah.
Just what it's, you know, done for us.
So there we go. That's some audio narration of our backstory for episode 2 of Shamans of the Global Village. I am Razam, and this is
Niles Heckman, and you always say Shamans of the Global Village.
You got to do it. You got to do
it. You do it with weight and gravitas.
Gravitas.
It's not Shamans of the Global Village.
No, like Shamans of the Global Village, mate. It's like Shamans of the Global Village.
Yes.
And you know, we hope that everyone who is listening to this enjoys what we've said, but also resonates and connects with what we've said. And as I like to say in our marketing copy for episode 1, they say it takes a tribe to raise a child, and it definitely takes a tribe to support a documentary series, not just of one episode, but of the audacious vision we have of what we feel has been given to us as this role that we can play as storytellers and myth makers and transmitters of these old ways becoming modern again. We need support. We need people to, you know, support by purchasing the show and to passing it on through their networks and their tribe and the One Global Family Tribe, because we feel this is a valuable message. And these times are, you know, tough. And they're we are the ones we've been waiting for. I mean, who the fuck else is there? If we don't do it, who will? Right. So we didn't even have a shoestring budget this episode. We just had the strings.
The strings. And in the current paradigm, where everything that is commercial seems to have budgets, and then there's just fuck all, zero, no budgets for this type of media, people still want to see the media because they know that there's such good content here. And we're honored to be having to be documentarians and documentary filmmakers. That it's a struggle to make these things. It's not easy. There's really intricate sensitivities around them. There's access issues. There's heavy financial difficulties to make it work. So we're not in scarcity, we are in abundance, but we always are finding so far that we feel like we barely have the resources, and we squeak through with making it be able to work with the tiny amount of crew that we have. And there is not any other way that the show could be made, even if we had a larger budget, without doing it very sensitive and light and being kind of a fly on the wall. And that was something that was told to us by the Marakames, is that you can partake in this ceremony and film this rare event, but don't be such a heavy weight on it. Just be very
flow
and in the background. And that's what we do. And we can do that when we have such a small crew and a small team. And your understanding of these things and my understanding of these things allows us to be a unique set of filmmakers that I think can capture this material. So it does feel like it's the right place at the right time to make this stuff. And that's the guidance we speak of.
All right, let's be beautiful out there, and we'll see you again for episode 3 of Shamans of the Global Village.
Yahoo.
Well, there they are. Our new electronic media, or our new gadgets. You push a button, and the world's yours. You know how they talk about the world getting smaller? Well, it's thanks to these that it is. Everywhere is now our own neighborhood. We know what it's like to go on safari in Kenya, or to have an audience with the Pope, to order a cognac in a Paris cafe. But not only is the world getting smaller, it's becoming more available and more familiar to our minds and to our emotions. The world is now a global village. A global village.
Rayo.